Hello, this video is in addition to the prior cinematics video that we did. So there's two other really quick things that I think are very helpful to add and they don't take long to add. So one being a skip button, which I highly recommend because it's 2025. Your cutscenes should not have no skip button on them. And then cutscenes. So using the blueprints that we made from the last video to be able to play cutscenes from wherever you want in the game, not just the opening scenes. So it's going to be a child of our BP triggerable. So whenever the player walks into it, triggers a cutscene. So let's get right into it, starting with skip button. Let's do that really quickly. So if we go back to the widget blueprint for the opening cinematic that we made in the last video, we left off on the graph. So just hit this designer button to go back to the UI stuff. And then I'm going to add a button. So in the palette panel, type button and then drag the button onto the canvas panel. So it's a child of the canvas. And then I'm going to rename it the skip button. And I'm going to anchor it. So go to the anchors in the detail panel and anchor it to the bottom left. And then once it's anchored there, if I zero out the position Y, it's going to go there. I'm going to double the size of it. So double size X and double the size Y, and then drag it up a little bit. Just drag it down on the Y value. Y position. And then I'm going to go back to the palette and search for a text and drag the text onto the skip button to child it there. And I'm going to change the text to skip. And then I definitely recommend make it prettier, to like the font to match the style of the game that you're making. The skip button, if you want to change the appearance, you just go to the appearance section, style, normal, hovered, press. You just change the image parameter. So when that is all good, move my big head out of the way. Scroll down to the on-clicked event, press plus. As you guys know, because we talked about this in class before, it's just what happens when you push the button. It's right below all the other stuff that we have in the event graph. First, I'm going to drag out from that and remove all widgets. So the deed is basically done. And next I'm going to open, well, I guess for the opening cinematic, we want to open level by object reference. So the same thing that we're doing if the, cinematic had played out naturally, we're just going to skip to that point. So for me, it's L level 1. So whatever you want the player to go to, wherever you want the player to go to. And then right click anywhere and search for get player controller. Because when we start the game, the player's going to have mouse control, or we're going to make it so that they have mouse control. So let's pull out of there and set show mouse cursor to false. So just don't check that. And then pull out from player controller again and search for input mode to game only. Because before it might have been on UI. So we want to put it back to game. And that is looking good. That is going to be our skip button functionality. I'm not sure if you have to do this, but I guess technically you should, so that you know that they have mouse control to be able to click the skip button in the first place. You should set the mouse cursor to true when the widget pops up, and then set input mode to UI only. Like that. Now if I go to my opening cinematic level and I press play, I have mouse control. I see a skip button. If I click it, it starts the game. Looking good. All right, now let's make the widget blueprint for the cutscenes, because there's going to be slightly different functionality for normal cutscenes than the opening cinematic. You could theoretically make them on the same blueprint. It's just like at the end of this one, we're opening a new level. At the end of a normal cutscene, you wouldn't want to do that. So you could like make a bool that's like, is this an opening cutscene or not? If not, then it doesn't open a new level. But there's also like other stuff like for cutscenes, you could have dozens of cutscenes in your game. So you want to have something that you can would have a variable where you can set that cutscene and whatnot. Ultimately, I just decided I was going to make a new widget blueprint for normal cutscenes. Okay, so let's do that. Let's duplicate. So find your WB underscore opening cinematic, press Control D to duplicate, and then name it cutscenes. Open that up, and then we have all this beautiful stuff that we already did. All we want for this skip button is to remove all the widgets. So I just deleted the open new level node. Like I said before, we just don't want to open a new level at the end, so we don't have any need for all of this delaying. Because all this is doing is waiting for the cutscene to end before it opens the new level. But we're not going to open a new level, so we don't need to get that stuff. Also, instead of scrolling through every actor in the level, because I think that might be a little bit too expensive, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, you know, to find our audio like we were doing before, let's just instead delete this. Or rather, just delete the get node and the get actors of class node. Pull out from the rewind, and let's just spawn a new class. Spawn actor from class, and then spawn our BP opening cinematic audio from there. And then the return value gets the media sound from that blueprint. And that's it. That's all we got to do. Right click on the spawn transform and split the struct span, so that it's just going to spawn it 0, 0, 0 everywhere, which is fine. And right now in the open source, it's always playing that opening cutscene that we made. But like I said, we want to be able to choose the cutscene that we play. So let's turn that into a variable. So let's right click, or let's go to the variables plus and make a media source variable. Change it to type media source. And get that in here. And then we will pass this from the triggerable object that we place in our scene. And from there, we'll choose what cutscene we want to play. Let's make sure that we make this public. So instance editable and expose on spawn so that it's a pin that we can attach to from later, which we'll see in just a second. Next, let's make the triggerable object that the player has to walk into to trigger the cutscene. So I'm going to go to blueprints, triggerables. The BP triggerable is the parent class. So I'm going to right click that, create child blueprint class, and name it BP underscore cutscene trigger. Open it up. Has all the stuff. Gonna go to the event graph, and then here I'm gonna make it easier, and I will have a description that has the link to this code for this. So I'm just going to select everything except for those two beginning nodes because I already have those. And we're gonna paste this next to the actor begin overlap and the parent actor begin overlap, because we want it to trigger when we begin overlapping, right? I'm going to connect that right there. And there's all the stuff. So this cutscene to play variable, we have to make that. So you can either make it manually or you can right click. Yeah, I'm just going to make it manually. Variables, plus button, cutscene to play. And then that's of type media source. Change, yeah. Now when I compile, it should not yell at me for that at least. Okay, we're good. Make sure the class is set to the new widget blueprint we made, which is the one for cutscenes. Add it to the viewport. Looks like we need to reconnect this up. Or looks like we'll have to remake this. So we want to get the media player from this widget blueprint. We want to get this media player from this widget blueprint. So let's But right now, this media player is not connected to that one. So let's get the media player once again. I just pulled out from that to get this media player. We can delete this one now and set that there. Looks good. And the reason we're doing that is because when we start the cutscene, we want to disable player input, which is what we're doing here. Get player character, casting to it, and disabling the input of the player. Obviously, you don't want the player to move around during cutscenes. And then the same way we delayed the level from opening until the cutscene was done, we're getting the duration of the cutscene, and we are making the player not be able to move for that duration. And then at the end of that, we're enabling that. We're enabling player input, removing the widgets, and we're destroying this cutscene trigger because we don't want to keep walking back and forth and triggering the same cutscene over and over again. By the way, this media source input parameter, that is the media source that we made here because we made it public in the details panel that's exposed on spawn. That's why we can see it here, which allows us to plug in this cutscene to play immediately, which of course that's the cutscene that we want to play. So we have to make this one public too. So select it and in the details panel, instance editable and expose on spawn. Because we check it here and compile, when we drag that triggerable, BP underscore cutscene trigger, when we drag it into the scene, I'm going to make it a little bit wider so that I can walk into it without trouble. You see this parameter here. It's public. We can see it, the cutscene to play. And then we can just hit whatever cutscene we want to play there. So let's go over how to do that, because you have to do that in a particular way, like I mentioned. But just to emphasize it, in the content movies folder, it has to be in that folder, basically. Can't be anywhere else. So content movies. If you don't have that folder, you should have it because we made it in the last video. But yeah, for adding new media sources, the best way and the most surefire way of doing it is just right click, show and explorer, and then having your video here. So for me, it's only been working for MP4. It's not like Abby's or anything. So I just dragged another MP4 video in here. I have it right here. It's just another random tutorial that I had because that's just what I had on my computer. And then once you have it here, drag it into the movies folder in your Unreal project, just like that. Just like what I just did, except it's not working because there's cache. I'm just gonna rename it. That one. Rename it and then drag it in Unreal. And now I can use it and I can package it and I can do all that stuff. So if I wanted this video to play that video that I just added, then you click it and you just change it to that from here. But let me duplicate this, and then I say if I walk over here, then I want to play the opening cutscene, then I just change it from here. All right, let's see what happens when we run into a cutscene. For example, if I run into this one. All right, so the cutscene's working, the button's working, that's awesome. But I'm sure many of us know what the problem is the music is going after I hit skip, and I still can't move my player after I hit skip. And you probably know why as well. It's because the normal way that we're doing that is we're taking the duration of the cutscene, and then at the end of that is when we're enabling input. But when we hit the skip button, we are causing that to happen early. So how do we fix that? Basically, we just need to do all this stuff when we hit the skip button. We need to enable input and we need to stop the music. Yeah, so anyways, luckily we have our media source on our widget blueprint, so we could or our media player rather, so we can drag a copy of that at the end of the on-clicked functionality stuff. Where'd it go? Drag out from the media player and press close. Search for close and just a basic close function and connect that up. That was when we want to enable player movement. So I'm going to copy and paste this one, or you can just find that. I'm being super lazy. Get player controller, cast to the character FPS, drag out, and enable is what we want to do. Enable input like so. Let's see what's going on now. Cool. All right, it's working. And if I walk into a different cutscene. Hi, this video is going to talk about how to publish your project to itch.io. Basically, tutorial within a tutorial. Anyways, that's looking good. And then if you let it play out, I'll test that really quickly as well. A couple of mistakes. But first of all, I forgot that it's supposed to destroy itself once we walk into it. So we shouldn't even be able to walk into it twice because typically you wouldn't want something like that. So when we hit the skip button, we're not destroying the cutscene. So we need to figure out how to fix that. And one way that we can do that is by creating a reference to this triggerable object when we create the widget, so that on the end of that on clicked, we can destroy it. At the end of this on clicked here, we want to be able to destroy that cutscene trigger. But we need to make a reference to that cutscene trigger because all this is a widget. So right now this has nothing to, we created the widget from the trigger, but right now it's fairly independent. So let's give it a reference. So let's make another variable and I'll just call it, what should I call it? The owning cutscene trigger. Whatever, owning cutscene trigger. And this is going to be the trigger that created this widget, created this cutscene. So change it to BP triggerable. It already is for me, but BP triggerable object reference, and then make it expose on spawn and instance editable. That way we can see it. I'm going back to our blueprint cutscene trigger, and you would see it here, but we need to refresh it. I wonder if I can just refresh it from here. Refresh notes. Oh, look at that. So here it is. And now we can just plug ourselves into it. So let's search for self and plug that in there. We can delete this event tick. Right on. So compile that. And then if we go back to cutscenes, get a reference to that owning cutscene trigger. And now it should be destroyed at the end. I think I'll add, actually, no, I won't. All right, let's test it. Skipped it. If I walk back into it, it's gone. It's destroyed. Hi, this video is going to talk. Love it. By the way, some games you don't want players to be able to skip just normal cutscenes, like maybe only opening cutscenes. So if that's the case, then you would just open up, go to the designer, and then remove the skip button from just your normal cutscenes widget blueprints. Or maybe you want to have some cutscenes that are skippable, some that aren't. Maybe you would just you duplicate this and name it widget blueprint skippable cutscenes. And only in that one would you have the button, right? But I'll leave that to developer discretion. All right, one more thing to check. Let's just make sure that we have reserved or maintained the functionality for when we just let it play out naturally. Okay. So when I let it play out normally, it did not give me control back at the end, which is because I didn't have the I didn't set it back to the game input mode. So I'm just going to copy and paste. These get player controller. Set mouse cursor to not there, and then set input mode. This will be in the copy and pasting script, so you guys won't have to do this part. But and then you'd also have to, when you disable input, make sure the mouse cursor is showing up again. And going into UI mode. And then making sure the player controller is connected there as well. This is set to that. And I forgot to do that over here. And then for these ones, I made sure that flush input was checked on both of them, the input mode settings, which is going to make sure that the player doesn't continue walking when it's done because it's flushing all of that input. So even though you're probably pasting this code, it's still helpful to know that. Testing it again, going all the way through. All right, that's perfect. That's it for this one. I just sort of threw this together and made the video immediately. So if anybody sees anything that could have been made better, if anybody has any suggestions, feel free to let me know or leave a comment or something like that. Otherwise, that's it for now. Peace.